Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. The global number of coronavirus infections has topped 127 million with over 2.78 million deaths. Meanwhile, India has reported its highest daily COVID-19 cases since October, taking the tally to more than 12 million. The country has recorded 68,020 infections and 291 fatalities in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has registered over 4,500 cases and 41 fatalities overnight, bringing the death toll to over 14,200. The European Union has threatened more sanctions on the perpetrators of violence in Myanmar. In a statement, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said the killing of protesters is unacceptable. U.S. President Joe Biden has also condemned the situation, calling it terrible and absolutely outrageous. In Myanmar, security forces have killed another anti-coup protester and wounded a toddler in fresh violence. Dozens of people have been killed in a militant attack on the northern Mozambique town of Palma. Military said hundreds of locals and foreigners have been rescued, while 7 killed as they attempted to flee the town. At least 2,600 people have been killed, while nearly 700,000 displaced in a 3-year armed campaign in the region. The stranded container ship blocking the Suez Canal since Tuesday has been partially refloated. Inchcape Shipping, a maritime services provider, says the vessel named the Ever Given is now being secured. However, it isn't yet clear how soon the Suez Canal will be open for traffic. And in tennis, top seed Daniil Medvedev has narrowly edged world number 86 Alexei Popyrin in the Miami Open. The world number 2 defeated the 21-year-old Aussie 7-6, 6-7 and 6-4 to secure his spot in the last 16. Meanwhile, Italian teenager Yannick Sinner beat Russia's Karen Khachanov 4-6, 7-6, 6-4 to reach the round of 16. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. The global number of coronavirus infections has topped 127 million with over 2.78 million deaths. In Mexico, authorities say the death toll is much higher than previously reported, putting its tally at 321,000. More details on the pandemic in this report.
Disregard for precautions, the politicization of the pandemic, vaccine nationalism, and the continuous spawning of new variants has led the world into yet another wave of COVID-19. The UN has once again warned that the world faces intense problems of debt sustainability due to the crisis. Meanwhile, the US has suggested it will not take punitive action against China for its handling of the COVID-19 outbreak. In an interview, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, Washington called for mitigating a future pandemic. Moreover, the variant first detected in Brazil is now threatening to send shockwaves across the globe. And the sanctions hit and cash-strapped Venezuela has proposed to pay for vaccines with oil.
Petróleo por vacuna.
Dedicate oil for vaccines. Venezuela has the oil vessels and has the customers who will buy our oil. And they would dedicate a part of its production to guarantee all the vaccines Venezuelans need. Oil for vaccines. We are ready and prepared for oil for vaccines, but we will not beg anyone. Venezuela does not kneel before anyone in this world. We have dignity and we have the resources.
In Europe, the Czech Republic has identified a new strain of the virus. But authorities say this mutation is not more dangerous than the British or South African variants. In France, the number of COVID-19 patients in intensive care units has risen to a new high for this year. Elsewhere, Sweden says it won't be able to hit its target of inoculating all adults by 30th June due to delays in vaccine supplies. Meanwhile, Australia has announced a snap 3 lockdown in the northern city of Brisbane to stamp out an outbreak of the UK variant.
But what this means for Greater Brisbane is that we will have to go into a 3-day lockdown. This is the UK strain. It is highly infectious. Now, we need to do this now to avoid a longer lockdown, and that lockdown will commence at 5 p.m. this afternoon.
India has once again reported its highest single-day increase in COVID-19 cases since October, taking the tally to more than 12 million. The country has recorded 68,020 cases and 291 fatalities in the last 24 hours.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 41 more deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has risen to 14,256. The ministry reported more than 4,000 cases for the fourth consecutive day. More than 659,000 people have tested positive since the pandemic began, out of which over 598,000 have recovered. Meanwhile, the most populous Punjab province will decide on further tightening restrictions in the provincial capital today. Meanwhile, the Punjab province has announced to impose lockdowns in districts with a positivity rate of more than 12% from April 1st. It comes after Lahore reported more than 24% COVID positivity rate, the highest in the country. Moving on, the European Union has threatened more sanctions on the perpetrators of violence in Myanmar. In a statement, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell said the killing of protesters is unacceptable. Borrell said the bloc is making efforts to initiate a political process in the country riddled with violence. U.S. President Joe Biden has also condemned the situation, calling it terrible and absolutely outrageous. In Myanmar, security forces have killed another anti-coup protester and wounded a toddler in fresh violence. Meanwhile, Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha says his government is preparing for a potential flood of refugees from Myanmar. Talking to media in Bangkok, Chan-o-cha said he doesn't want an exodus into Thailand, but he will not compromise on human rights. And dozens of people have been killed in a militant attack on the northern Mozambique town of Palma. A spokesperson for the security forces says hundreds of locals and foreigners have been rescued. Militants launched the assault on Wednesday just as French oil company Total announced to resume work on a $60 billion gas project nearby. The attackers have also besieged a hotel in the town with many foreigners inside. Security officials say 7 people were killed while attempting to escape the hostage situation. At least 2,600 people have been killed, while nearly 700,000 have been displaced in the 3-year armed campaign in the region. And the stranded container ship blocking the Suez Canal since Tuesday has been partially refloated. The Suez Canal Authority said the course of the 400-meter-long Ever Given has been corrected by 80%. The authority added that further efforts to move the boat would resume later on Monday. The skyscraper-sized Ever Given has held up $9 billion in global trade each day, bringing disruption to the vital waterway. The blockage created a 65-kilometer-long traffic jam of 369 vessels. The cargo vessel ran aground on its way from China to the Netherlands last week. And Slovak Prime Minister Igor Matović says he will step down and swap roles with Finance Minister Eduard Heger. Matović decided to leave office over the controversy surrounding a secret deal to buy 2 million jabs of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. His decision to step down has been welcomed by coalition parties as well as his opposition from the SAS party. At a press conference, Matović said he had decided to drop all previous conditions for his resignation. Slovakia has received 200,000 doses of the Sputnik vaccines, but their administration is pending testing. It would be the second EU country after Hungary to vaccinate with a product not approved by the EU drug regulator, the EMA. Meanwhile, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison has reshuffled his cabinet amid growing public pressure and plummeting approval ratings. 2 Australian ministers have been demoted following dual rape scandals that shook national politics. Morrison replaced Minister of Defence Linda Reynolds with Peter Dutton, previously Minister of Home Affairs. Michaela Cash has replaced Christian Porter as Attorney General and Minister for Industrial Relations. Meanwhile, many women took to the streets to call for gender equality and an end to sexual violence. Recent polls show the allegations also significantly dented Morrison's approval ratings. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi will head a delegation to Tajikistan today to attend the 9th Heart of Asia-ISTANBUL process. The theme of this year's conference in Dushanbe is strengthening consensus for peace and development. The Foreign Ministry said Qureshi will deliver a statement on Pakistan's positive contributions to the Afghan peace process. It said the Foreign Minister will hold consultations with key regional and international partners on the sidelines. The ministry added Qureshi will also meet the Tajik leadership and review the entire scope of bilateral relations during the visit. At least 480 migrants have been intercepted off Libya by the Coast Guard in the past 48 hours. The International Organization for Migration said they were attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea to go to Europe. The IOM says they are among the 4,500 people brought back to Libya this year. Photos posted on Twitter show workers giving medical aid, blankets to migrants after they arrived on shore. The agency also voiced its objection over the treatment of migrants inside the war-torn country, saying Libya is not a safe port. Moving on, North Korea has accused the UN Security Council of double standards when it comes to its treatment towards Washington and Pyongyang. North Korea's Foreign Ministry official Jo Chol-soo said the UN Sanction Committee's meeting against Pyongyang negates its right to self-defense. Jo added that UN resolutions are direct products of the U.S. hostile policy. He added many other countries across the globe are firing all kinds of projectiles and warned that a double standard by the Security Council will only cause an aggravation on the Korean peninsula. In Lebanon, hundreds of people demonstrated in Beirut against deteriorating economic and living conditions. The protest was organized by the Lebanese Communist Party. Carrying banners, the protesters demanded better housing, education, and healthcare services. They rallied outside the central bank and marched to the government palace amid tight security. Lebanon's problems were compounded after an explosion at the Beirut port last year. The economic fallout comes amid a continued failure to form a government since the resignation of Prime Minister Hassan Diab. Former Premier Saad Hariri was designated to form a new government, but he remains at odds with President Michel Aoun. A massive fire has broken out at one of Indonesia's largest oil refineries. At least 5 people were injured in the blaze in West Java province. The fire caused a large explosion, damaging houses nearby. Authorities say the fire forced nearly 1,000 residents living nearby to evacuate. State oil company Pertamina says firefighters are at the scene while the cause of the blaze is still unknown. Officials said some people are also reported missing. Pakistan's naval forces have participated in bilateral Asad al-Bahr II exercises with Qatari naval forces at the Doha port. In a tweet, Pakistan Navy's media cell said the exercises involved Pakistani and Qatari Navy's ships and aircraft. It said the drill was aimed to strengthen bilateral ties and enhance naval collaborations between the two countries. The Navy said the mission commander of Pak Navy's flotilla called on various Qatari dignitaries during his visit to the port. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. In France, thousands took to the streets of Paris demanding politicians to do more in the fight against climate change. French lawmakers will start examining a bill on climate change on Monday, but critics say the bill is not ambitious enough to limit the country's carbon emissions and meet the requirements set in the Paris Accord. The bill, called Climate and Resilience, aims to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. The draft law is the result of the work by 150 French citizens, which made propositions to fight global warming. Hundreds of Cubans took to Havana's famous seaside to demand the U.S. lift its 60-year-old embargo on the Caribbean island nation. The caravan was part of a weekend of small protests in more than 50 cities around the world. Riding on colorful cars, motorcycles, and bicycles, the Cubans were fluttering flags, yelling, "Down with the blockade." Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez was also present at a demonstration site. Talking to the media, Rodriguez slammed Washington's opportunistic tightening of the blockade in the midst of a pandemic. Previous U.S. administration took more than 200 initiatives to tighten the decades-old trade embargo on Cuba. Now, Venezuelans are fleeing to Colombia to escape clashes between the military and irregular armed groups. This report has the details.
Clashes between armed groups and the military have caused chaos in Venezuela. According to a Colombian official, as many as 4,000 have fled the country. Displaced Venezuelans say soldiers have resorted to killing civilians, among the other abuses.
You are invaded by sadness when you realize that you cannot be at peace at your own home. It fills me with nostalgia and pain. It's not easy to get home, the one that you build with a lot of effort, and find it in a disaster.
Venezuelan authorities say they are investigating accusations that members of its military committed abuses, including detaining and killing civilians.
Resulta imperativo recordar.
It is imperative to remind the international community that the before-mentioned groups have the sponsorship of the Colombian government and the Central Intelligence Agency, which is why their incursions into the Venezuelan geographic space should be considered as an aggression sponsored by Ivan Duque, since he provides logistical and financial support, creating a criminal corridor on the border with the advice of the Southern Command of the United States of America.
Meanwhile, Colombian President Ivan Duque has accused Nicolas Maduro's government of sheltering FARC dissidents, but the accusations were denied by Caracas.
Now, the ongoing China Fashion Week in Beijing features a number of talented young Chinese fashion designers. Their combination of modern and traditional outfits has brought a visual feast for the audience. More details in this report.
The increasing role of women in the professional domain calls for the attires which suit a working environment while also fulfilling their fashion needs. Young Chinese designers have tried to cater these requirements at the ongoing annual Fashion Week in Beijing. A show displayed over 30 business outfits for women, depicting them as more capable, experienced and modern. Another collection by the designer Shai Yi depicted techniques and luminous colors to form a strong contrast. A use of non-planar elements presented a sense of colorful dreamland. Western silhouette skills were also combined with traditional and original Chinese handicrafts at the show. The local handiwork such as doodling, tie-dyeing, knitting, tassels and doi shu were listed as intangible cultural heritage in over 50 outfits. The traditional Chinese heritage and craftsmanship will be further highlighted in the annual event, which runs up to 31st of March.
On to the latest in the world of business. European stocks are trading mixed after investors show reaction to the surge in COVID-19 cases and vaccine rollouts in the region. The Pan-European Stock 600, Frankfurt DAX, and the CAC 40 in Paris have edged up marginally. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB have dipped under the flat line fractionally. Earlier, Asian markets also traded mixed, with mainland Chinese stocks and Japanese bourses gaining. Shares in Hong Kong and South Korea slipped, while Australian stocks remained unchanged. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.